So we'll get started. So thank you very much everyone for participating and agreeing to come on and being part of this course. I'd like to welcome all national judges from New Zealand and Australia. This course running for both countries because we feel our judging standards are very similar. We pretty much base them on the FIP standards. So I've just got a bit of housekeeping, so hopefully everyone can see my screen. I'm going to request that everyone turn their microphones off during the presentation, so that way it gives us a chance for the speaker to be clearly heard. And often people get interrupted while they're viewing Zoom, so it stops us hearing things that we shouldn't really hear. You can ask questions during the talk through the chat function. So down below you'll see chat. You can type your question. We may be able to answer them live. If not, I can then ask the speaker each of those questions. Each of the speakers will have appropriate times where you can ask questions and they will solicit those. So that's the two ways of getting questions. After the session's done, I'll leave the Zoom open for just general discussions about what we've done, what we're going to do. At that point, people don't have to stay behind. You can actually leave the session. But I just thought it might be nice if we need to chat about or embellish some of the slides. Once these sessions are finished, we will put them on the APF YouTube channel. And I say we, but I mean Pete Allen. He does a great job for us for IT as well as the president of the APF. Once the people that have missed the session seen the YouTube, I will be requesting they just send me a reply email so I can mark them down as viewed. At the end of the course, at the end of all the sessions, I will be sending out a survey just to see how well we put this together. If there's anything else that we could have added onto this course, if there's any other type of courses we could run the same way, whether it be the Judges Refresher course or an Exhibitors workshop or something like that. So they're the type of things I'm looking for. And please learn, encourage each other, be encouraged and enjoy the sessions, all right? It is still a hobby after all. So the leadership course, you've been invited because you are a leader. You've been a team leader, you've been a secretary, or you've been a chairman, or we actually feel that your next step up is to be a team leader. So that's why you've been invited. So we haven't opened it up to every national judge, just people that are currently team leaders and also people we feel would be moving up over the next couple of years. So the leadership course has primarily been put together by the APF, and the initial drive of this is from the late Gary Brown, and I'd just like to dedicate this course to Gary. I think he drove us in so many areas, and of course making us better judges was always forefront of his mind, so we dedicate it for him. Now the reason for the course is we want to maintain a standard for our exhibitors. We judge at FIP level. So when you get a 17 for treatment here in Australia or New Zealand, you should get a 17 for treatment at international level. Our medal levels are different, but our standard is at FIP. So if we're going to be, keeping our national judging at FIP standard, we need to be refreshing on a regular basis. So for some of you, you know what to do. You've been chairman, you've been a secretary, you've been a team leader. This is refresher and maybe some new ideas. For the new people, it's probably all going to be new, and it'd be nice for you to reflect on your team leaders, secretaries and chairmen and juries you've been in. Did they do all of these things? Will you be able to do those things, and can you do them better? Always strive to be better. I also believe that our exhibitors are paying a lot of money for the privilege to be a national or an international exhibitor, and we owe it to them to judge correctly, to give them good feedback and make them proud of what they've done. So I think that's all part of having a high standard. And also, as things advance, we will be introducing new technologies into judging, and I think this is a good forum to be made aware of all of these. So just briefly going through the sessions, I'm doing the introduction currently. Charles will be doing the responsibilities of judges. So that's where we're going to start. What can a team leader expect from a judge? What should a judge expect that the team leader is going to expect from them? We then will do, the next session is on team leaders' responsibility. Then we move up to secretary's responsibility, then the chairperson's responsibility. We do have a jury assessor's role here, and I think you'll find that's probably going to be implemented more internationally as well. So we want to make you aware of what we do. One of the new technologies, a guy, Lars Engelbrecht, developed a PowerPoint presentation for secretaries to use to drive the jury room with PowerPoints, because that's part of the new technology. I'll be going through that. We'll have a session on the FIP Commission updates, and I'm getting Ian to drive that. And of course, then finally, you know, the confidentiality in the jury and also outside the jury. You know, once the jury's closed, you can't start saying things like, well, I would have given you something better than that. You know, once you put your hand up and agreed and signed off, it's done and dusted. So these things are pretty important to us, and I think it's all about maintaining a standard. There'll be a face-to-face session, I hope, if Newcastle isn't locked down, that we'll run the first one in Newcastle. If Wellington can give us a bit of time and space, we'll run another one there. We'll run one in Adelaide in 2022. And if people have missed out, then I will look for further shows where we can just do a review on everything we've done in the presentation. We'll look at the commissioners update, so the role of the commissioner both nationally and internationally, and then we'll have a look at how exhibition aid, so those who want to be secretaries of juries or chair of the juries will really want to know how exhibition aid works. And for the New Zealanders who don't use it nationally, they will be using exhibition aid at the international level, so there would also be a good time to have a look at that. So what I'll be doing is every 2 weeks we're running these sessions. I will email the Zoom invite 2 days before, so on the Monday. I emailed it through a calendar invitation, and I realised some of the computers aren't set to their normal times, so the times are a bit confused. I'll avoid that for the next one. I'll just send out and recommend what times they're going to be. Typically within 48 hours after a session, I hope that we can upload the session to YouTube, but please give me a week for the first one so I know what to do and do all the right things for Peter. So what I will do is shut up myself and hand you over to Charles Bronzer. And Charles, thank you very much. So let me stop sharing and hand it over to you.
No, good evening, everybody. What we're going to look at tonight is the role of the judge. It is going to be intended for a qualifying seminar for people who want to become judges for the APF. The purpose is really to ensure that we have fair and accurate and consistent judging. People need to appreciate and understand the role of judges, need to develop the competencies that are required for a judge. It's such that we can improve the quality of judging at exhibitions in Australia. And as I said, our intended audience are qualified judges. And as Glenn has already told you, for a lot of you, this is just going to be a refresher course. And if you've heard it all before, that's all right. We're just trying to try this out for a seminar. The topics that we're going to look at today are the ongoing requirements, that is what you need to do to stay a judge and remain on the register, self-education, how to maintain and improve your philatelic knowledge, the preparation before an exhibition. You'll be getting title pages, so the preliminary work that you need to do, the research and the notes that you're going to take with you to the exhibition. Participation in the jury, so we'll be looking at the judging, adhering to timetables, being a team member and contributing to the team. Some common issues that we have in judging, such as bias and poor preparation. We'll be looking at jury deliberations, consensus, how we nominate for Grand Prix or special prizes. We will then look at the important issues of feedback, both written and in front of frame. Remember, the whole purpose of the feedback is to get the exhibitor enthused in exhibiting, and you need to then help them on their way. There will be 3 sessions for questions. And when that comes up, it'll say question on the screen. And then you could either have sent a chat to Glenn during that time, or you can just ask questions at that in that section. So firstly, we'll be looking at ongoing requirements, what you need to do to stay on the register. So the real purpose of your judging is to, when you're asked by the APF to judge, that you take up that position. There are lots of people on the register, so remember they're going through a roster, so it's best to take up your position when it's offered to you, whether it's at state level or national or international. At the exhibition, you need to bring your research, you need to be punctual, complete all the tasks that you're given, and especially on the feedback. You do need to do both feedback written and at the frame. You need to respect the confidential nature of a jury, not only during the exhibition, but as we've been told, after the exhibition. The last thing you need as an exhibition chair is to hear that there's all this scuttle going about the exhibition because somebody wanted to discuss the discussions of the jury or any disagreements that might have been there. You need to stay active, exhibit in as many classes as you can and as many formats. So do try a one frame, do try a multi-frame and move from class to class. So you get a good feeling of what is required and what some of the problems that people would have if they were doing maximaflia or if they moved into postal stationery. You just need a good feel of all of the classes if you can, because remember, the more classes that you've covered, the more likely you are to be requested to be a judge at an exhibition, because you'll be able to be more versatile. When you do judging or you do exhibit, make sure you report that to Glenn so that he can keep track of what you're doing. To stay qualified, you do need to exhibit at least every 4 years, and you need to maintain a record of at least 70 points, and preferably move on into the Vermeers, large Vermeers while you're doing it. Attend exhibitions whenever you can, and always go to judging seminars or workshops at those exhibitions. Sometimes in this day and age, there's very little international travel that would keep you from judging. But if you do have a reason that you need some time off for judging, you can look for a leave of absence for up to a year. As you're getting older, you might feel that there's a reason to resign. Just let the APF secretary know that you need to stop judging, and you'll be taken off that register. Sometimes if you're retiring as a judge, the APF might give you the emeritus status, which will mean that you really only judge when the exhibition is in your state or in your town. You can be suspended from the register if you don't exhibit every 4 years, if you don't attend seminars or workshops that the APF feel are a requirement, misconduct while judging, if you break confidentiality, if you refuse to do feedback, or sometimes people disappear for long periods of time during the judging. And this is often noted by the judge assessor, and they will take that up with you. And another problem could be incompetence while judging, that you come to the exhibition with a lack of preparation, or that you give very poor feedback that isn't useful for X8 at all. And reinstatement as a judge is up to the discretion of the APF. Judging is a lifetime a possibility. Continued education is really needed. It's sort of a lifetime education that happens. Exhibitors do expect you to know about their subject, maybe not a deep knowledge, but you do need to have a deep knowledge of the class. And so to maintain that, you do need to do lots of reading. And nowadays you can go to the net and do lots of research. Seminars at the moment are rife all over the place. Even full judging can be done on the net. There are virtual exhibitions that you can participate in. So we need to do a lifelong education of judging and subscribe to a wide range of publications, especially beyond your field. Read and study widely. Typically for an exhibitor and a judge, you should be reading things like the American Philatelic Exhibitor, or in New Zealand, the Judges Forum journal that comes out regularly. And of course, you do have London Philatelist, Thief from A in Australia, the Collectors Club. There's a plethora of material that you can get. Never forget that, of course, the APF website has material, and it can even take you to the FIP commissions, which most of them now have a website where they keep you up to date in what's happening in your own class. However, always collect different classes, different formats, so that you get a good feel of the difficulties of each class. As I said, attend exhibitions, as many as you can. Always be fully conversant with the FIP guidelines and SHREVs. At the moment, you'll find that most classes have changed these in the last couple of years, so you might need to go back there to do a follow-up on them. The APF does have a link to most websites, so you could do it via the APF if you need to. The idea with your exhibiting is you're not there to win medals as a judge, but you're trying to get empathy for the field and the field for the class, so that you do understand the sort of problems that exhibitors do have when they're making their exhibits. Preparation before an exhibition. You will get copies of the title pages and sometimes the synopsis, probably about 6 weeks before the exhibition. And once that comes to you, that's when you need to start making your preparations. You need to read them over, and what you'll find is that currently team leaders will also contact you and tell you which exhibits you're going to be a leader for at the frame and which exhibits you'll be expected to do feedback, both written and verbal for. Obviously, if you know to the exhibitor or you've helped them prepare their exhibits, you should recuse yourself from that exhibit and let the team leader know or the secretary of the jury know this. But remember, you need to be prepared for all of the exhibits that you've been allocated, because sometimes you'll find that you need to prepare work for them since somebody else can't do the judging. And sometimes you'll be asked even to judge in a class if you're really not prepared to work with it. So you need a full, good understanding of the classes to do that. On the title page, most title pages nowadays do have a small section of references. So you do have a first base where you can get your knowledge and start going to either your personal library or a philatelic library to do some research. But remember, the title page is going to be the foundation of your studies. You do need a basic understanding of the subject that's being evaluated in that exhibit. So look at this title and try to then imagine what are some of the challenges, because probably you've exhibited this yourselves. So look at what sort of material would you expect to see in a exhibit on astrophilately? What sort of write-up would you expect? Well, what you need to do is start to think about what materials are going to be there and how the exhibitor might be presenting them. Remember, you don't have to be an expert in all subjects, but you must make an effort to get references so that you do know some background of that exhibit. Things that you need to start thinking about is the acquisition of material. Is it an easy topic? Is it a difficult topic? Do they have personal research? If they do, is it shown on the title page? All of these things need to be taken into account so that you give an effective and coverage of the whole of that exhibit. Look at the plan. Is there a good storyline in the plan? Is it logical? Does it flow from beginning to end? Or do you notice little gaps that you need to comment on? So the logical process is to start looking at that title page and thinking, what is the in-depth knowledge that I need to be able to cover it. So basically what I do is when I get a title page, I turn to the back of it, which is nice and blank. And nowadays, you probably will be expected to print out your own title pages because exhibitions rarely send them out to you in any other form but virtual. So on the back of the page, I start writing what's the purpose of the exhibit. What's its scope? Is it narrow? Is it broad? Maybe it's too broad. What do I expect as a condition of the material? Is it going to be mainly used material? Is it going to be modern material? So we need to then look at the catalogue, and you might find that the modern material is rather difficult to find. And you need to note that then on the back of that page. Things like importance. Some topics are presumed to be very important, and you need to then think, how is this going to be shown? How is the rarity going to be highlighted? You can remember that some exhibitors like putting ticks or stars. Other exhibitors like using different coloured matting. So you need to look for these highlights on the title page. Then start thinking, if it's going to be a high-level exhibit, what do I really expect to find? Where can I find evidence of personal study? What references do I need? Do I need to go to the catalogue level? Do I need to go beyond catalogue level? You know, do I need to read a Proud maybe on the postal history of Botswana? So you do need to then start thinking, what do I need to do? How can I read these articles? Sometimes you're lucky. David Collier will send you articles on the topic if you ask him. And then look for what improvements can be made to that title page and the introduction. I think we're now up to questions. So are there any questions on that section?
So I've got one for you, Charles. So in Australia, the majority of title pages that I see prior to judging are pretty woeful. Would you start looking at written feedback before you get to the jury on that title page on how to improve it, or would you wait till you see the final version of the title page?
No, I would start with their draft, because basically I find that most of them, in terms of, in say, postal history, they give you a nice story about Mauritius, and they talk about, you know, the expense of his Mauritian stamps, and then their exhibit probably starts 30, 50 years later. And so they're not very good at scoping their title pages. And plans, the plan usually does, they usually stick to that plan, but often the plan has got big gaps in it in terms of time spans, because the material was difficult to accumulate. So you do need to look if there was a change between the draft and what's in the frame, but you definitely should start getting the feedback then.
Thanks, Charles.
Time is of the essence in every exhibition, I suppose. You know, the days of week-long exhibitions are well gone. Any other questions?
So I just posted a note earlier that about references. So I'm expecting that the exhibitor knows the up-to-date references for the material that they're exhibiting, and quite often they don't. They're using an out-of-date catalogue or publication. You know, something's come along later that they don't know about, and immediately I'm thinking, well, marks for knowledge are going to go down because of that. So, you know, the references that are quoted are important for two reasons. One is that it shows knowledge, but two, it helps us judge that exhibit.
And especially nowadays, some people will give you Wikipedia as a reference. as opposed to the actual URL that is required for it, because, you know, Wikipedia can find anything. So yeah, some people do have very scant references on their title pages. But I suspect that's our job to find a reference that is useful for us.
Yeah, and I think that's important with new exhibitors, because how often do you see Stanley Gibbons' Catalogue of the World stamps as a reference? I mean, what's the point in that? Because they feel like they need to put 2 or 3 references down. And I think David's right. We need to guide them in. They need to put the appropriate reference. And if there's only one, then just put the one. You know, it's not a competition on how many references you put down.
And especially in, say, thematics, where people give you good references on the life of the gorilla, but they give you little, if any, references on the philately of the gorilla.
Just a comment, and my experience is limited, but the most effective way of pulling information I've come across as a judge is when the team leader or the team before the exhibition pull their knowledge. And if you've got a team of 3, and inevitably there'll be somebody on the team that knows more than the other 2. So I've had quite useful experiences where we've shared photocopies or scans of relevant texts prior to the exhibition as part of our preparation. I've certainly found that sort of very helpful, because not all of us can gather every reference for every exhibit, but as I say, 3 people, somebody's usually got a fairly good knowledge of that subject.
Yeah.
I also just want to make a point. I'm not sure whether it's a good idea to contact the exhibitors just on the title page. Will that sort of put them off or make them feel uncertain about what they're doing before they actually put in their complete exhibit?
No, I wouldn't contact an exhibitor at all.
Well, you've just said that you do.
No, you contact other judges.
Oh, right. Well, that's fair enough. Okay,
You know,
thank you.
Imagine if you got something on Nicaragua, well, the first person you go to would be Glenn. You know, you have some knowledge about your colleagues in terms of what their preferences are and what they're good. So you need to contact them. And your team leader would be able to help you with that subject by finding people that are relevant in the APF.
Right, thank you. That's really cleared up my concern.
Yeah, but I'd never contact an exhibitor until, not even after the exhibition. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll move on.
When you talk about quoting references, you can quote them on the front page, but you can also quote them through the exhibit as a
quote.
Yeah, at the bottom of the page.
Yeah.
Because in some exhibits there are a lot of references that can be quoted that are totally appropriate.
Mm-hmm. And some exhibitors now put little cue codes on their pages as well, so that you can find the reference. Okay, we'll move on to the next section then. Participation at the exhibition. So in this section, we're going to look at the judging. Remember what you need to bring with you. Nowadays, it's best if you bring your own clipboard, your own pencils and that. And more importantly, bring a laptop with MS Word, because you'll need that for doing your written feedback. The days of pen-written feedback are very gone. You often get a timetable sent to you either by the jury secretary or by your team leader. Note the times on this, especially the ones for roll calls and meetings. Note when the photograph is going to be taken. In Australia, there are presidents who really like you to be there with coat and tie, so make sure you have that with you. And note the feedback times at the frames so that you're ready to be there at the right time, rather than go to a special luncheon just for a special function group. Block out the times, tell your friends and family that you're really not available, Typically, we'll start on lunchtime Friday, and then you end up late in Saturday, and sometimes even Saturday mornings by the time you do your Grand Prix. So block out those times and let people know that you're not available. Remember, your allegiance is to the jury and its tasks, so being on time, staying there until you're released is really important. Sometimes you're going to have to go to things like the opening ceremony, palmareses, social events that are required for jury members. So you need to remember that you're representing the jury and the APF, so dress appropriately for those occasions. You're not going to go to your dealers until you're released, so don't expect that you have time for that. And expect that you're busy most days. And when you're not at the frames working with your colleagues there, you should be preparing your feedback in your mind and writing down notes for it. Now, typically, judges in Australia are commissioner judges. So really, while you're mounting exhibits, you should be noting the sorts of materials that you're seeing go through your hands. And you're getting a very close-up look of some exhibits. And note anything that really needs the requirement of an expert. You might find in your team that there's not enough people that are going to be able to comment on an exhibit. So note if you need to find a qualified expert in the jury to help you with those. Make sure you get to your first appointment meeting very early, because this is the time where you introduce yourself to other people, where you get all the paperwork from the jury secretary. Make sure you're bringing your badge with you that the APF has given you that appoints you as a judge, so that everybody in the exhibition also knows that you're a judge, and dress appropriately. It might be nice and warm in the afternoon when you get there the first day. Believe me, it's 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night when you're in one of these cold halls, but you do need to have a jacket there and that you're ready for that. So what do we expect you to be? We expect you always to be a team player. You're not there just for yourself. You're there to help the whole of the jury. You need to be an active participant and even be proactive. If the paperwork isn't at your desk, you might need to go to the secretary and pick them up yourself. Remember, we need reasoned and independent decision makers there, not people who are just going to sit and listen, but people who actually participate in the debates that we have. Tell your team leader what you think about an exhibit or what you feel about importance. Awards need to be based on objective and balanced results. You need to avoid unfairness, make sure there's consistency, especially in terms of similar exhibits. They need to score similarly. But always support the jury and the team's consensus. Once you've made your mind up about the award level, then that's what the award level will be in your mind as well. The last thing you need is to talk to exhibitors at the frame and disagree with consensus. Take responsibility for completing feedback forms and make sure that every time you give constructive feedback to an exhibitor, the last thing we need to do is to have them being scared off by the reports that they get from the exhibition. So we work in teams of 2 or 3, depending on how big the jury is. The reason for that is that we have broad opinions and experiences across the whole of that jury. Make sure that you voice your opinion. Don't just allow one person in the team to dominate. Your role there is to make sure that there's consistency and that your thoughts about exhibits are also coming to light. You need consistency, especially of treatment and importance, and possibly even presentation. Always talk quietly at the frames. Just don't be surprised if the exhibitor is sitting at the other side of the frame waiting and listening. If people are at the frame that you're going to do, ask them politely to move away, and then they can come back and look at the exhibit when you finish judging. Always be aware of your physical state and your mental state. If you're tired, or your legs are tired, or you're grumpy, that will affect the way you judge. And usually it is the more pain that you suffer is the more likely you're to be a harsh judge. So take some time that you can sit and have a cup of coffee in the jury room if you need that. Some typical do's and don'ts of being in a jury. Don't force a medal level. So some people look at an exhibit and say, oh, that's Vermeer, and then work their way to the Vermeer marks simply by doing some mental arithmetic, which is really not the idea, because you should be taking each criterion seriously and awarding the marks for that. Some people think that if you take 10% off every criteria, that gets you a reasonable mark, and again requires very little thought. And basically it'll stop them having to look at every item in the exhibit. So try to persevere with the scoring that's needs. And don't look at previous scores. Some people come there with a whole shopping list of previous scores for exhibits. And again, that's not very useful because, of course, there could be new material there. They could have tried different methods of showing the material. So try to always look at the scoring that you do. I usually have a spreadsheet that lists all the exhibits and then has little columns for each criteria, so that on one sheet I can see all of the marks that we've given for presentation or for treatment, so that we can keep control of consistency in terms of maybe at the beginning of the frames you were very hard and then you become easier in your marking, or vice versa. So the best way to do that is to review your marks as you go along. And of course, while you're at the frames, remember that you're going to do feedback, so make some notes about strong points of an exhibit, what areas need improving, what your colleagues at the frame have said about that exhibit, and note things like their frame numbers, their page numbers, so that you have some basis to make your feedback later. Another issue is, of course, bias or prejudice. We all have our favourite type of philately. Some people really like the classics, and others feel that 20th century or 21st century philately is not very important. However, every exhibitor who's put in an exhibit and the organising committee has taken their money obviously require careful consideration, because it was a serious entry. So don't let your personal biases override the marking. Always look at some countries or classes of philately. Some people think that aerophilately is a bit contrived, especially in the early years, where you gave them a couple of envelopes and they flew them from Karachi to Sydney. It's the STREVs and GREVs and guidelines of each of the classes that are really your basis for making your decisions, rather than your personal feelings. Inexpensive material versus really expensive material. Some people simply say, oh yes, he had $23 million. Obviously he could buy all those important items. However, once the exhibition has taken that exhibit on board, you need to give it serious attention, just as you would for any other exhibit there. The same with the method of write-up. There's no reason why a neat handwriting is any better than a computer-generated exhibit. And don't spend too much time on the little items of write-up when you can look more for important things like the treatment across the exhibit. Now, some scoring problems that you'll find. One of the most common ones that we'll find in exhibiting is what I call double pinging. So people will look at it and say, Yes, the treatment is very poor for this exhibit. If you look at the plan and then go into philatelic knowledge and then still say, well, it's still very poor, and carry that through to condition and rarity as well. Remember, each of your criteria that you're judging on needs to be taken seriously and not fall for the trap of the double ping. Avoid paying too much weight on presentation and not enough on material. In general, you should always have good philately should get rewarded, as opposed to people who have made erasures or typographical or grammatical lapses. Questionable material should always be given the benefit, unless you really know that something is fake or something is misrepresented in the write-up. You should then simply say, yes, I might comment on it in the form at the end of the exhibit when I'm talking to the exhibitor. They might have to tell me how they find that material, but you have no reason to ping them because you don't know about the material. Remember, there's no right way or wrong way to exhibit. As long as it's a logical flow of treatment, whether people put their postal history together with their stamps or have the stamps followed by the postal history, it really doesn't matter. Judging the owner is, of course, totally inappropriate. You're there to award the exhibit, and whether you like the exhibitor or not, or you had previous problems with that exhibitor, shouldn't be taken into account. And remember, judging's not an ego trip for you. You're not there so that everybody in the jury knows who you are. You're there to sympathise with the exhibitor's topic, to help the jury get fair and consistent results. Refrain from imposing your standards. Look at the exhibits for their individual approach and only comment on the effectiveness of their approach, and never denigrate an entire effort. I'll see if I can wake you all up with a question then. And don't simply say it's a horrible exhibit, or it could be, we could pick up this material at the dealers today. Each exhibit requires its effort, and you need to think about that when you're going through them. The jury deliberations. Once you've finished your marking at the frames, the jury then retires to deliberate about medals, special awards. And the jury chairman usually then asks each team for a nomination for Grand Prix and special prizes. At this time, this is where disagreements between teams sometimes come to the front. And what you'll need to do is remember as a team leader that if others from other teams have problems with your exhibits, that you should ask them to take a score sheet and to score the exhibit, rather than to simply discuss what they dislike about your marks that are up on the wall. Because during deliberations, most of the marks are put up on the wall for jury members of all teams to go and look at. And you need to then have that process where you sort out their difficulties. But usually that is sorted out at team leader level rather than individual judges having slanging matches across the jury room. Apprentice judges mightn't have a vote, but you should encourage them to talk about exhibits and what they know in terms of which Grand Prix items they could find useful. All deliberations in the jury are, of course, confidential, not only while you're in the jury, but especially outside of the jury. Juries need to be certain that they have a freedom of discussion at that jury level. Remember, the results are confidential until they're posted. Always keep your jury sheets safe in the jury room, and when you come to special awards and Grand Prix, remember that this is part of the Palmares. And so it's best not to have rumours floating about the Palmares about these awards. They mustn't be discussed outside the jury. And it's question time.
Charles?
Yeah.
There was two comments that were made then. One was the beginning where you said that a jury, if you don't know about the material, you can ask other jury members.
Yeah.
And later on, you mentioned regarding knowledge, you said you can ask an expert about the material.
You could.
Which be a non-jury member.
Yes.
Consultant.
Imagine if you didn't know anything about Indian rocket mails.
I don't.
And there's nobody in the jury that knows anything about Indian rocket mails.
Yes, but
However,
you state there ask other jury members.
No. Imagine there's nobody in the jury that knows about Indian rocket mails.
That is why I asked the question.
So then you could have a consultant. You might go to one of the dealers who has Indian rocket mails and knows about it.
Yes.
Yeah. So if there is an expert in the building, you should ask that expert about them.
Totally correct. I agree with that 100%.
Yeah. So, lack of knowledge in the jury shouldn't stop people getting marks for what they're presenting. And if there is an expert in, you should be asking them. Except the person that's actually, presenting the rocket mail themselves. But yes, I've got no problems with having consultants to a jury. If there are no other questions, then we'll go on to our feedback session. So feedback, the preparation required for feedback. The last section that we're going to do is we're going to look at written and verbal feedback. The written feedback in Australia gets given to every exhibitor. And nowadays we have the program that allows you to do it, and it's on a computer. So you are required to bring a computer to the exhibition that has Microsoft Word on it. It's terrible for an exhibitor to have a handwritten or scribbly one that they can't see. So it's very important that you have written feedback provided to you with a nice computer-generated page. Now, there's no official way of writing reports while you're out on the jury. You could be writing notes on a piece of paper, or you could just write them against the score sheet that you had. However, once you get to the exhibition aid feedback page, it's produced by the computer, and the feedback forms are typically blank. So one of the best ways to cover that is to write each of the criteria that you've used, or criterions for each area of the exhibit that you've done. Write that on the sheet so that they know about the presentation, the treatment, and the knowledge. And what you have is, of course, your notes during your judging that you've commented on their frame numbers, their page numbers, so that you can make relevant notes and write relevant data about each of the exhibits and each of the areas. Remember, you're only going to base it on real judging criteria, not your personal feelings. In your spare time while you're on the jury, you should take some time to go back to the frames and jot down important things that you might have missed while you were going through them while you were judging. That way you'll get a fuller form, that when you're filling that feedback form in, that you get a better idea of what you're going to put on them. So when you're using XAid, you need both positive and negative statements. Exhibitor only benefits from when you're going to help them in their exhibits, rather than simply give them vague ideas about presentation. On the feedback form, there's a little box there for the One-Up Club. So if you feel that the exhibitor would benefit from that, you need to tick that. At the end, the forms will be printed, given to the team leader to sign, even given to the jury's chair. So in all of that process, there's time for change. And now that you've got the computer, you can make use of having useful statements that you've got on the computer already, and you can then use copy and paste to make life much easier for you. Make sure you keep a copy of your statements. Once they've been printed out, take a copy of that printout so that you've got a basis to make your verbal comments when you're at the frame. And sometimes even months later, somebody will ask you about an exhibit that you've done, and you've got that copy. And what we need to remember with feedback is that at a lot of exhibitions, not many of the exhibitors are there for their front of frame, and the forms that you filled out for the written is the only contact that they have and the only discussions that have been made about their exhibits. So they're vital that you give them good feedback on that written form. Once we're at the frames, now you have an opportunity to go even greater depth than what you had written, because you're now with the exhibitor. Always make sure that you have their permission to talk about their exhibit in front of others. Sometimes there'll be a whole crowd of people with them, and some people feel embarrassed if you're going to discuss their exhibits with them. So take time to have the exhibit, your suggestions about their exhibits in their own time. Remember, philately is a friendly hobby. You're not there to simply give them another lesson, but you're there to support them, and you're the face of the exhibition for that exhibitor. So remember, encourage rather than discourage, be helpful, courteous, supportive, and don't be confrontational in that with the exhibitor. We want exhibitors to go away being happy and being able to improve their exhibits. Find and emphasize elements in their exhibits that can be encouraged. Look at things like the title page. Have they got a good purpose? And find ways of moving them on to higher awards. So rather than say you can't get gold with this exhibit, give them advice in terms of gold could be by adding this reference material, or gold could be, you could receive better marks if you limited the area as opposed to having a whole country. So provide them with some consistent and broad knowledge of their area, and highlight the strong points that they have and areas that they can improve. Always look for ways to change their scope maybe. Typically in, say, thematics, you get an exhibit on golf, where the first 4 frames are very good and the last frame has golf by Mickey Mouse and Goofy, where probably if they limited their scope and didn't include the cartoons, they would get a better mark. So always find ways of helping the exhibitor improve their exhibits through that section. Yeah, sorry about that. It's just clicked off. No. There. There. Slideshow. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're trying to retrieve it. Okay.
And here you are. Are we back?
Yep.
Can you hear it?
So don'ts in terms of feedback at the frame. So don't focus on presentation alone. It's very upsetting for an exhibitor that's got 8 frames in front of them to be told that the judges really didn't like the colour of their matting, that it would have been better to change it to blue. Don't make embarrassing comments in front of the exhibitor in public. Try not, well, yes, definitely avoid attempted humour at the exhibitor's expense. Don't direct the exhibitor to dealers or specific items, and don't offer to sell the material yourself. Don't say you really need a mull ready in this exhibit, when of course what they can do is improve their exhibit with different pieces of stationery. Differentiate between your opinion and the objective requirements that we had from the guidelines, and always take into account that you can't ask somebody to restructure a whole exhibit, but give them some pointers on how to remove or properly acknowledge fakes in their exhibits.
Back. Left one back. One back.
Mm-hmm.
There.
Okay, so always start with a congratulations, give them the breakdown of their points, mention the best aspects of their exhibits, and advise how they could improve with concrete examples. Make sure you focus on the good parts of their exhibits while you can. Simply don't start the world with you're missing lots of items, but ask them that, you know, their exhibit would be stronger if they included some usages or specific values being used at a specific rate. Be concrete with your exhibits, with your examples. And then finally, sometimes you will have exhibitors that get rather angry at the frame. So you need to stay calm, stick to your plan, explain the points, acknowledge their good parts of their exhibit, and suggest how they can improve, but always stay calm in that sense. And remember, jury consensus is what you've taken on board. So never say to an exhibitor, well, I would have given it a large vermeil as opposed to a vermeil. You were part of the jury, and their consensus is what you've taken on board yourself. And never disagree with award levels. And usually after a feedback sentence, the jury will be dismissed, and then you can enjoy the exhibition and go to some of the seminars yourself. And any final questions?
Just a comment. This is Jeff from New Zealand.
Yeah.
I was pleased to see the word feedback everywhere, because there are still jury timetables and other official documents that use the word critique. Critique,
yes.
And particularly some overseas areas, critique is read as criticism.
Yeah.
You know, do you want to go to the criticism section? Of course,
and obviously,
they don't.
No, an exhibitor doesn't. No. They do feedback.
And one other point you talked about, maybe rephrasing something. If you would like to get to a gold medal level, then what you need to do is X. That can be a bit tricky, really, because if the exhibitor does do X and gets to the next exhibition and doesn't get a gold, then the first thing the person's going to say is, well, I was told by that if I included this and this, then I'd be getting a gold. So I think probably better to phrase it as, if you want to hope to improve a medal level, rather than saying what you might need for a particular medal level.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I also think, Jeff, we need to ask the exhibitor, what do they want from the feedback? Because if we're going to take them from bronze to large gold international, and all they want to do is to get a large silver, I think we got to be wary of what they actually want and what we need to give them there and then at the frame. So I've been caught myself wanting to bump it right up several medal levels, and all I want to know is how do I get to the next medal level. So I think we do need to confirm with the exhibitor first.
I've also got a question. Oh, sorry, David.
You're right. No, you go first. You're a lady.
All right. About getting permission from the exhibitor to talk about their exhibit on the frame when there are other people around. Now, if there are other people around and the exhibitor doesn't want to talk about the exhibit then, I assume we just try and make another time to do it. What's the best way to go about that?
Yes, it'd be good if you could make another time with them, or you could simply ask the masses to move away.
Oh,
it really depends on the group, I suppose.
Okay, I'm just wondering if you ask the others to move away, whether that would be a bit of a blot on the exhibition. I'm not really sure, but
I think,
what do you think?
I think it depends how you phrase it.
Now, my comment is, my time. Over the years, I've had a few angry exhibitors, and I found the best way out of it is ask them to judge the material themselves by points. And in every case, that has worked.
A question about organisation for feedbacks. It seems to me best if, as the team is judging, that one decides on a particular judge to do the critique, obviously with comments from the other judges, actually when the judging's taking place. Do other people follow that style?
I usually have that as a team leader. I already pick the exhibits that people are going to take on board. So not only do they lead the discussion at the frame while judging, but they also then do the written critique and the critique at the frame.
Yeah.
And then there's always argy-bargy about people that say, well, you know, I really don't like Tongan tin can mail. Can we do a swap?
Yeah, okay.
If you email the rest of the team leader, suggests who is going to do which exhibit, if they email the team before the exhibition, then you can sort out any problems at that stage rather than wait till you get in front of the frames.
Charles, can I go back to Linda's question around taking others in front of somebody's feedback session? What I find is that if someone actually, you know, prefers the one-on-one or the jury team to the exhibitor interaction as opposed to the whole crowd, he or she is much better coming last in the feedback session. People are sort of grouped around because they want to get to theirs next type of thing. So if you leave it to the end or towards the end of the session, there'll be less people there, and it's easier to ask people to respect some confidentiality and move away.
And especially if you've given people time slots. So if you've got time to allocate a time slot to an exhibitor, that makes it much easier for them, and other people will then move away because it's either out of their time slot or not.
One thing you can also happen is that some people sort of hog the time you've got for feedback, and sometimes you just have to cut people off or offer to come back at a much later time. That can be a very tricky thing at times with people who just won't shut up or go away. Yes.
Before we carry on, what I want to do is stop recording. So, and I would like to carry on this general discussion. So those people who want to stay, I'm really enjoying hearing all of this. But those that need to go can go. But before you go, I'd like, on behalf of everyone here, to thank Charles. I think he's done a tremendous presentation. I felt that presentation is really the summary of our 2-day judges refresher course. He's pretty much covered every point that you can do in a 1-hour lecture. So if there's any judges that need refreshing and they haven't got time to get to a refresher course, when you get this link for this, please recommend him, because I think he's pretty much covered everything that a judge should do or should know. So on behalf of everyone, Charles, thank you very much. I really did enjoy that. So.
The thing you can also happen is that some people sort of hog the time you've got for feedback, and sometimes you just have to cut people off or offer to come back at a much later time. That can be a very tricky thing at times with people who just won't shut up or go away. Yes.
Before we carry on, what I want to do is stop recording. So, and I would like to carry on this general discussion. So those people who want to stay, I'm really enjoying hearing all of this. But those that need to go can go. But before you go, I'd like, on behalf of everyone here, to thank Charles. I think he's done a tremendous presentation. I felt that presentation is really the summary of our 2-day judges refresher course. He's pretty much covered every point that you can do in a 1-hour lecture. So if there's any judges that need refreshing and they haven't got time to get to a refresher course, when you get this link for this, please recommend him, because I think he's pretty much covered everything that a judge should do or should know. So on behalf of everyone, Charles, thank you very much. I really did enjoy that. So.